Go Medasi. Go Medasi. Aquaba. So it's just a little West African Fonte language just to say, attention, please. Thank you very much. And welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome on this Sunday afternoon. Hope everyone is maintaining your highest possible level of mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. We're glad that you decided to join this All African People's Revolutionary Party weekly workshop every Sunday from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. Shukura and I are here doing this. We have a number of other comrades doing the same thing across the world, which we'll mention at the end. But today's topic, creating revolutionary families in a reactionary society. Very critical topic, so we're glad that you're here with us for this one. As always, we start with respect to the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. Much respect for them. They are in a fierce fight for their land back. These lands in the Western Hemisphere still do belong to them. They don't belong to you. If you're not an American Indian person, you're here, but this is their land and they're fighting for their land back. So we support them in that struggle for their just self-determination, which means getting their land back, nothing short of that. And we also pay respect and homage to our African ancestors, who are the very reason that we exist today, the only reason that we exist. They were the ones who fought and stood up against oppression. So if you are African walking around here today, it is only because your ancestors stepped in the way of violence so that you could exist, so that you could have the opportunity to do that. So we pay respect and homage to each and every one of them for doing that. And we're glad you're here for this very important topic. We're going to talk about how do you create family values based around revolutionary principles. And by revolutionary, we mean, of course, the proper definition, uncompromising change. So how do you create families with those types of values that go up against the grain of this everyday society? Like, how do you do that in healthy ways so that you can have a family that operates based on principled values and practices, in spite of every institution, whether it's work, school, church, whatever it is, treating you like you're insane for doing that, treating your family members like you're insane for believing what you believe. But we know all of the institutions here are dominated by the capitalist system. So what we're talking about is, for those of you who are interested in families that do not attempt to function based on these capitalist values, these individualistic values, like, how do you do that? And so we have some experience with that. So we're going to share that with you today, Shukura and I. And so we're glad you're here for that. And we'll just start with our round of intros. My name is Ahjamu, organizing in the All African People's Revolutionary Party since 1984. I've done work for the party in several geographic areas throughout Africa, in Europe, the Caribbean, and of course, across this plantation. Since that time, I've done that work to build the party. And with me, as always, and today, actually physically with me, which is wonderful, is my amazing daughter, Shukura, who grew up in the All African People's Revolutionary Party's Young Pioneer Institute and is now a participant herself, as well as a PhD student in communication public health and an all-around activist for Pan-Africanism and women's health issues. So just honored to have her here, whether it's virtually or physically or both. Today it's both, so thankful for that. And again, the party's objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa, one unified socialist Africa. That is our objective. That's what we're working for. And if you want to understand that better, I suggest I direct you to the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare you see on the right there on your screen, written by Kwame Nkrumah in 1968. This book outlines why we believe Pan-Africanism is the solution to the problems African people face in over 120 countries on Earth today. We are not in 120 countries because we went there for a better life. We are there because of colonialism and slavery. So we cannot view our existence the way other people view theirs, because our history is completely different. The colonial and slavery system today in 2021 is the reason why African people are in the harsh conditions we face in those 120 countries. So for us, the only solution to that is correcting that problem, and that's through Pan-Africanism. And so in the handbook, Nkrumah calls for on-the-ground formations throughout Africa to unite, who agree with the objective of Pan-Africanism as one unified socialist Africa. And so on the bottom right, you see logos of various political formations throughout Africa. You're not going to hear about them on CBS or CIA network. So if you don't study Africa, you don't know anything about these organizations. But they are Pan-Africanist formations on the ground, hundreds of thousands, millions members. And our work is to bring all of these entities into one. as Nkrumah calls for. And that's the work that we have been doing since 1968, and we continue to do and build victories every single day. And we, of course, have chapters all over the world and relationships with other liberation movements. Yesterday, I was honored to help with security in San Francisco during the Palestinian March. A couple of weeks ago, I did the same thing for the passing of an indigenous elder here in Sacramento. And this is the work that we do, you all. It's not work that's going to be on television or in the newspapers. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to build relationships and build capacity so that we will win. And so we're glad that you're here to join us for this very, very important topic. And to get us started, as always, this week, all I have to do is move the laptop around and pass it over to Shukura.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much, Daddy. I really appreciate that. I hope you all are in your highest spirits and doing well as best you can. I'm really excited to talk to you today about my personal experience with how I grew up in the party as a YPI member, Young Pioneer Institute member, and also how I monitored and watched my parents demonstrate Pan-Africanist values from the moment that I was conceived till the first moment I was able to speak and walk and go to my first work study meeting with my parents and so on and so forth. So the capitalist system has convinced us through constant messaging that pursuing a life of material comfort as a means of defining a successful life is our only option. We have been conditioned that we are truly successful when we have material items to show as representation of our own struggle and sacrifice. Owning material possessions communicates that we have worked hard and we have been successful to earn such a status. This means adopting a life that promotes and raises up capitalism, celebrating holidays that drive capitalism and imperialism. I did not grow up with these values. I threw birthday parties and offered prizes to my guests. I was also raised to understand and write thank you cards anytime anyone did anything for me, because it was a message for me to understand that people sacrificed all the time and that I needed to acknowledge their time and energy that they spent investing and coming out to support. So it was customary practice for my parents to encourage me to write thank you cards and send them out to my party participants. I still send out thank you cards today, and I feel that that is important for me to do so. In doing so, it reminds me that people make choices to support and celebrate us. And so that's why we need to acknowledge their time and value that. If you're not working hard enough, then you have to defend yourself to others and explain yourself. This is why young people who are unmarried, without kids, or living with parents are often shamed for not working harder and not having more. We are socialized to grow up, seek owning property, own property, and secure a house, a car at minimum, and anything else that would, quote, show others that we have arrived, end quote. Other items include boats, stock investments, motorcycles, jet skis, or RV campers. Now, owning items is not a heinous crime. What I'm trying to articulate is how do you use those items, and what's at stake is how are those items affecting your ability to deconstruct systems of oppression? Are you still fighting to make the world greater for oppressed people? And can you use some of your materials or own possessions to make that a reality? So for example, do you offer to host a meeting at your house? Can you help provide transportation to those needing support for those meetings? Can you provide your resources so that the circle can host a meeting, maybe a physical one or even virtually? This propaganda teaches us to compete with each other as a way of life, therefore making us see one another as threats. This type of intense socialization enables us to compete with one another. This is why, if you have a sibling or a cousin, your parents or family may remind you constantly of how, quote, successful, end quote, your sibling or cousin is compared to you. For many people many people I've engaged with shame me for being in school as an early aged woman identifying person in their early 30s. Although they mean well in their competitive based way, they encourage me to, quote, settle down because, end quote, I'm not getting any younger. And so many other people my age are already on their second and third kid. Competition is what drives the society based on our material possessions, showing others that we have arrived, as I've already said. Any effort to challenge the sick reality results in you deciding to live a life of being called insane, a life of isolation. My dad has said before that it is, quote, easier to swim with the stream than against it, end quote. When you decide to stand on your own principles, you can be labeled as crazy or abnormal. I recall my parents demonstrating Pan-Africanism as I grew up, and a majority of my maternal and paternal family members shunning them or discrediting them or questioning why they practiced Pan-Africanism. The best example I can remember is when my parents changed their slave names to African names, and both my maternal and paternal grandparents had issues and pushed back heavily using confusion, guilt, and reactionary approaches when my parents announced the news. The last point that I'll talk about for this slide is in order to attempt to avoid that isolation, people try to fall in line. As a result, resistance and rebellion, we are taught all negative forms of behavior while complete adherence to the values of the capitalist system are seen as a roadmap to success. All you have to do is look at the growing issue of mental health, physical health, and other dysfunctions to prove to us that this approach does not work for us. What are the penalties when you stand up and push against the system? What happens when you swim against the stream? You are socially outcasted, you are stigmatized, and you are often outnumbered to prove you are wrong. With all this pressure highlighting people who stand out, it then teaches others to be discouraged and to stand out less. Next slide. All right. So when we're making the decision that truth and justice are the priorities from which you wish to live your life and that of your family to be based on, this has to be a clear decision, just like where you live, where you work, and how you will lead your life. If you're receiving pushback from others about living life with Pan-Africanist values, then you must be sturdy and committed enough to know why you are a Pan-Africanist, why you believe in Pan-Africanist ways, so you can defend this lifestyle when people question it. For example, when Africans born on the continent ask me why I, an African born in America, have an African name, it is an opportunity for me to reconnect with them that I am proud to identify and connect with my African culture and ethnicity. Part of that means researching and reading to enhance my political education, thus being better prepared to understand who I am, who my ancestors were, where I come from, and who I am. And also that means using Nkrumah's teachings that any African anywhere is African, regardless of whether they were born, and thus must have an African identity. The second point I'll talk about today ties into the fact that most people are afraid of standing out because it means that you are believing in doing so, and that's usually how you become a target or a mark. But the truth is you're targeted anyway. Learning how to live based on principles and not backing down is the proper ingredient for training people to respect you in every sphere of life. This foundation also helps you to build on analysis that you can defend based on your own beliefs. So as I said before, you don't owe people an explanation. So that's not why you're defending yourself. But when people need to understand why you're making a choice, a lot of times people aren't taught from a disciplined standpoint how to have conviction and how to have credibility based on choices made. So by you doing this analysis, because you've done the research and you have a sturdy foundation, you're able to explain it and articulate it to them. And then it's irrefutable why this choice is yours so that they can't question it later because you've already stated all the facts for it. This also helps you because your self-esteem that you built up for yourself in attempting to live based on what's right instead of what's acceptable helps a great deal in helping you combat the anxieties and other experiences that you might experience that keep a lot of us from achieving our potential. This is important to remember when standing up for your principles, because when you stand up for your principles, many times you are setting an example for others that may be unaware of how to do this. And how does that relate to having a revolutionary family? More so if you are a parent, godparent, or guardian, this is a great opportunity to demonstrate for your child or children humanity and integrity versus social acceptance. Okay. The first thing we want to remember is that we have to take steps to implement a healthy boundary. So if you take on revolutionary values like raising your children outside of capitalist individualistic model, i.e. extended family holidays, or not being able to bring personal gifts, etc., you have to make sure that everyone else respects your lifestyle, including your parents. I remember when my parents changed their names, the whole family had issues with using African names. My older cousin was 4 years old at the time, and my grandfather had just admitted to my parents how challenging it would be for him to start using a new name from my mother. My cousin walked up to my parents and my grandparent and my grandpa and called out my dad's slave name. And my dad knelt down to her level and explained to her that he had changed his name and would no longer be called by that old name. He helped her pronounce the new name and explained that he would now be called Uncle Ahjamu. She pronounced it correctly and said, okay, and walked away. My grandfather witnessed the entire exchange and said, I guess I can get behind this. If you need another example of what it means to take a revolutionary value and make sure that people have premise to respect that, I have an older cousin who shamed my parents when they explained to her that I would have an African name and that we chose not to celebrate capitalistic holidays. She shunned them and accused them of neglecting me and my needs as a child. She told them that I would be bullied and grow up to hate them. I would also develop serious problems because of my abnormal childhood. At 34 years of age, she was wrong because I try to be humble in everything I do. I make mistakes constantly, and I always try to admit my wrongs and treat people with respect. I adore my parents and would not be here without them because I physically would not be here, but I also would not be here with the same values or principles because they raised me with that direct path that they gave me. I am a humanitarian, and I know my purpose is to make conditions for oppressed people better before I transition off this earth. And I give those examples to state the claim that if I had not had the childhood that I had, it would have given me so much more confusion because then I would not have been able to sturdily tell you my foundation is that I want to deconstruct oppression. And if you don't know who you are because you don't have an upbringing that gives you those constant values, then it's very hard for you to be able to articulate that later to your other people, but really to yourself, so that you actually know what your purpose is in life and that you literally have a reason to get out of bed every day. The second point I'll make is that you want to train your children and family on how to respond in principled ways to people who do not respect your lifestyle. Principal ways that respect your dignity. This will teach your family that they have a right to have space and hold agency. I teach human communication, and one of the assignments my students have to do is create a persuasive speech on any topic based on health that relates to people everywhere. So when they begin their research for their persuasive speech, to help build their confidence, I encourage them to research 10 scholarly articles that they have to comb through and be able to give in-text verbal citations about those scholarly articles as they are giving the speech. I do all of this because through all of that research, it enables the students to have a stronger foundation in talking to an audience and essentially persuading the audience to change their ideology on a topic. How does this relate to the talking point? When you have a sturdy foundation and knowledge for why you believe a set of principles, that gives you credibility and can assist you in responding in a principled way. The third point I'll say is that you want to develop an alternative revolutionary practice to utilize for your family that replaces reactionary things that are materialistic, such as celebrating Christmas. And be consistent with those practices and demand that everyone respect your practices. Be flexible but firm. Example, if people give your child a Christmas present, make sure they understand that your child knows that you've communicated to your child that Santa Claus does not exist and that you have taught them to appreciate sacrifices that were made on their behalf. Make sure your children thank them. The gift giver will come to respect your approach. This is such a critical step because this teaching helps reduce children developing entitlement and reduces children to develop an expectant behavior about gifts. The last and final point I'll make for today, and I'll turn it back over to my dad, is that we want to be able to establish strong methods of communication within your family. So no matter what happens outside of your family, you have a process to work through occurrences in your family so that everyone has proper comfort with your family decisions. Part of this means being patient with your children, because in raising them this way, Pan-Africanists, you will cause them to unlearn capitalistic socializations, which will generate them to ask more questions. That's very important. You're literally unlearning everything we've been socialized to do. So your children are going to have questions because you're teaching them to be critical. That's what being a Pan-Africanist is. So they're going to generate questions because children are already inquisitive, on top of the fact that you're literally telling them, forget everything you've learned in the last 8 years or 7 years or however old your children are. So be patient with that process. Be patient with the fact that they're going to have more questions. Part of effective communication is an exchange of consistent messaging from the sender to the receiver and vice versa. As they become more aware of their surroundings and how their friends are raised, which is most likely not Pan-Africanist, they become more critical and will need you to help add clarity where consistent messaging will fit. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Shukura, for that wonderful foundation, and for us to have the opportunity to talk about this, further. I think to encompass what Shukura was saying and really what our message is going to be today, you all, it would be to say that it really comes down to how you see society. Like some of you see like the United Snakes as, this great country. Like you agree with the propaganda that they present about it. It's a great country. It's the citadel of freedom and democracy in the world, or at the very least, you see it as it's the greatest country in the world. It's not perfect. It has a ton of problems, but I feel like I have to be here more so than anywhere else. And so I'm just going to try to work with this as best I can. So you either see it in that sphere or you see it the way we see it. You see it as an empire that was built and is maintained on human suffering. It never has been a center of democracy. It's not even set up to be that today. And if you think about it, there isn't even a cognizant argument to suggest that this is a democratic society. How can you have a democratic society when people don't have any information? If you don't have information, you can't make proper decisions. So even if you can vote, it doesn't mean anything because you don't even understand the system that you're voting in. If you cannot define what capitalism is and how it manifests itself in all around the world, or not even in this country, people can define that, then how is you voting going to change? You don't even understand. You just participate in something you don't even understand. And we all know it's like sitting down playing a dominoes game and not even knowing how to play. And then you talking all this trash. You don't even know how to play. People are laughing at you. And so I know people don't want to hear that, but that's the reality, is that this has never been about democracy here. This is an empire. And the voting process in this society is based on providing a rubber stamp for the ruling classes to get you to support their agenda. That's what's going on. That's always been what's going on here, and that will always be what's going on here. So when we're talking about a family based on revolutionary principles, what we're saying is when you decide you don't want to have a family that operates acknowledging those backward practices, and you want to practice something else, and you want to do that while you're existing in this society. And how do you do that? Because like Shukura talked about, everything you do is going to come up with opposition against you and what you're doing, and shaming and all of these things are going to, we've experienced that. I've experienced that for the last 40 years. And so you have to be grounded in order for you to deal with that, because most people just give into it. And they just make all these justifications, especially when you get older. When you get into my age, people have all these justifications for why they do the things they do. And I didn't, when I was in my teens and 20s, I didn't know a whole lot. But one thing I did know is that I didn't want to get to the age that I am now and be making a lot of excuses, because I'm just not the person. Like, if I know something is true, then I have to deal with that truth. I'm not the kind of person that can live that kind of superficial. I just don't know how to do that. And I thank goodness that I've never been able to know how to do that. So I knew that if I was not living my life in a way that represented me trying to achieve dignity and respect with integrity on the best level I could, that I would not be able to live with myself. So decisions were made, and those decisions were great decisions, and they were all based on the topic that we're talking about today. How do we organize our families? I can't change the whole society, but if I can start with myself and then expand that out to my family and expand that out to friends, then what do you know? Before long, we have a society where revolutionary consciousness is rising, you all. And when revolutionary consciousness is rising, then our ability to have a revolutionary change becomes imminent. But as long as we're making excuses for why we, just give in to what the master system is put out for us, then, you know, it'll always be a struggle for us to move beyond the point move towards the point that we want to get to. So that's what we mean when we say don't ever compromise your principles. And in order to understand that, the first thing is people have to understand the difference between principles and strategies and tactics. And most people are extremely confused about that. They don't know the difference. They think strategies are principles, and they think principles are strategies and tactics. They don't know the difference between the two. And so that's confusion. And so that's for the examples we have here. If you look at it, when you make the decision in your life and you say, well, I'm never going to place profits above people, that's a principle. And what that means is that you're saying you're never going to take an action that places the interest of you acquiring money over the interest of a human being. And that is something you can never compromise on. You can't make that statement and then tomorrow somebody says, you know, I'll give you $500 if you write a bad rumor about this person doing activist work so that we can discredit him. And you're like, well, I need $500, I'm going to do it. Then that's not a principle for you, because a principle is something that you can never compromise. It's the values that you base your life on. So once you say something is a principle and then you compromise it, then you're saying you don't have any values. You don't have nothing in your life is sacred other than material stuff. And then if that's the case, then we know we don't have to deal with you because you're not serious about life. So a principle can never be compromised. Understand that clearly. And understand the difference between a principle and a strategy and a tactic. A strategy and tactic are just methods you use to achieve an objective. Those change based on their effectiveness. They might change every day. So, for example, in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, our strategy for getting free is our objective, or Pan-Africanism, which that's how we see us getting free, is our objective. So our strategy is to unite revolutionary Pan-African formations worldwide into one and have a worldwide fighting force for the liberation of our mother, Africa. That's what we're about. That's our strategy. And our tactics are doing things like what we're doing here, having these weekly workshops, doing that everywhere in the world as a way of spreading the knowledge of Pan-Africanism so that hopefully people can say, okay, this is exactly what we need. I want to get involved with this. I want to commit my life to this. So the point of the tactic is to help build capacity for the strategy. And the point of the strategy is to forge direction for the objective. Okay, so that's the difference. So like we said, a principle is not rising profit over people. A strategy or a tactic better is like, how you decide you want to celebrate somebody's birthday, a loved one's birthday. Okay, you change that every year. Like you wouldn't say, well, we're going to celebrate that we're going to go to this restaurant, we're going to order the same thing, and then we're going to sing happy birthday, we're going to exchange presents, and that's going to be it. And that's how we're going to do everybody's birthday every time the same exact way. You wouldn't do that with a birthday because that wouldn't make any sense. So that's why that's a strategy and tactic. Like the strategy is how do you celebrate people, and the tactic are the methods you do. Well, maybe you might go to the beach this time. Maybe you might take them to ride the go-karts, whatever they like. Those are tactics to achieve the strategy, right? So those change all the time based on effectiveness, again. So it's important to understand the difference between principles and strategies and tactics, because if you don't understand that, you'll be duped into compromising your principles. And so when we're talking about establishing those clear parameters with your family for what your principles are, why they're important, and why you cannot compromise them. And the way you do this, you all, is you have to have conversations with your families and friends. That's what I did. That's what we did. We had conversations with them, not just when we changed our names, but in everything we did. Because Shukura, she's sitting right here. She can tell you, she wasn't raised with Christmas trees. She wasn't raised, we told her from the beginning what that was about. We told her, we did the history. We had lessons. We told her what Thanksgiving was. We told her there's no Thanksgiving. This is the indigenous people's land. They stole this land from them. So we don't celebrate that. So we didn't have dinner around the table on that day. We didn't when she was a baby. We still don't. We never did. And what we did do is we went to Alcatraz for the American Indian movements on Thanksgiving. We did that. So that's her. That's how she grew up. So she didn't have any confusion about what the day represented. We didn't celebrate the 4th of July. We never did that. She'd never done that in her life. We would celebrate my parents' anniversary. They got married on July 4th, so we would celebrate that. But we would have 4th of July events. That's how she grew up. So there was no confusion about any of that. But when you have that kind of lifestyle, where you're doing those things consistently, where you're sending notes to your children's school saying, my child does not do this. Don't make them pledge allegiance. We don't pledge it. We burn that flag. I said, I went and talked to teachers and told them that. I know a lot of you wouldn't have the courage to do that, but I'm telling you, that's what you got to do if you want people to respect you. I told them, like, that's not our flag. That flag has been built against the interests of our people. It's been built against the interests of indigenous people. It's even been built against your interests, but you don't have sense enough to know that. So that's your problem. But don't try to impose that on my child. And that's what we would do. And we lived our lives. So when you understand, when you do that, people are going to be coming after you. And if you don't have the conversations with each other, then you are not going to be prepared for that assault. And trust me, it is an assault. It's a constant assault. Some of it being carried out by people who love you and mean well. Some of it being carried out by people who absolutely want to destroy you. But it is an assault. And you have to prepare. You have to inoculate your family so that they have the foundation to deal with that. Because if they don't, they won't. And if they won't, you'll be compromising everything you say you believe in. Then you have to establish a strategy for responding when the pressure is applied, because they will come after you. So you have to have a process for how you will deal with that. What will you do? So what we would do when we were when Shukura was a child, is we would talk to her. We would explain to her the history of this society. You know, we used to have a little joke that we would say. We'd say American history can be told in 10 seconds if you tell the truth. The reason why they have to send you to school for 12 years is because they're lying. And so, you know, when you lie to someone, you have to build up the lie. You have to constantly reinforce it. So it takes a lot longer. When you're telling the truth, it's very simple to tell the truth. You know, you try it sometimes. Like, that's why they say the truth will set you free, because it's very simple. It eliminates all the stress. You just tell the truth and it comes out. So we would sit down and do that with her. We would tell her, this is the history of this country. Some crooks from Europe stole us, came over here, stole the indigenous land and built an empire. That's American history. That's all you need to know. And then we would just break that down, the examples of that, how they stole the indigenous people's land, the land programs that they created, like the Homestead Act, to steal indigenous people's land, make it illegal for African people, indigenous people, Asians people to get land. Only Europeans could get it. We talked to her in depth about the transatlantic slave trade. We took her to Ghana. We sacrificed. So she was at 4 years old, walking around the slave dungeons. At 16 years old, walking around the slave dungeons in Goree Island in Senegal. And we constantly talked about that. We sat down, we vibed, we can call it prayed, whatever term works for you. We spoke with the ancestors and made sure she understood this is what happened to our people. This is why we're in the situation we're in today, because this system that was set up built the wealth of the empire that dominates our lives in 2021 and beyond. And so when they come to you in the classroom and they tell you, you need to pledge allegiance to this flag that did all this, we can never do that. That's the principle. We can never bow down to that flag. We will never do that. And I would go there and tell her teachers, and have a discussion. They're like, you really don't commemorate the flag? You know, realize this is the 1980s, early 90s. You don't commemorate the flag? And I tell them, I burn those flags. I burn them. If you give me one, what would happen? One teacher, what would happen if I gave you a U.S. flag? I'm like, if you don't let it go, your hand will burn, because that bad boy is getting burned. I'm trying to get to 500 burnt flags, and I'm close. So that's what'll happen. That's how that'll go. So we would tell them that. And then there was one year, there was a teacher that forgot, or I don't know what happened, didn't respect it or whatever their problem was. So they forced Shukura to pledge allegiance to the U.S. flag. And of course, you know, again, we communicated. We had a communication problem. So she came as soon as I picked her up. How's your day? Well, the teacher made me pledge allegiance to the flag. She didn't want to do it, and she, you know, so she wanted to report it, get it off her soul. Like, she wanted to report it. She was about 7 or 8 years old, and so I told her, reinforce your family through values of love and respect. So I told her, you didn't do anything wrong, because she was like, thought she was going to get in trouble with me. And I'm like, you didn't do anything wrong. That's your teacher. And this is what they do, is they're not really there to educate. I mean, everything was a conversation, but that's what you have to have with your children. And if you don't want to have that, then you're not qualified to have African kids and oppressed kids in this society. So you got to be committed to doing that. And so we would do that. Her mom and I would do that and explain to her. I remember that day, explain to you, Shukura, I told you, like, this is not your fault, and I'm gonna go talk to this teacher. You don't even worry about that. And then I took you to get ice cream to reinforce that you didn't do anything wrong, because I didn't want you thinking that this was your problem. This is not. I wanted you to understand this is something that was done to you. You were violated. They had no right to do that. And I went up there and talked to that teacher, and the teacher told me, well, yeah, I was wondering. I'm like, well, what were you wondering about? You got the note. Well, I saw it, but I didn't know. I didn't really understand what it meant. I said it was clear. She does not do the Pledge of Allegiance. You give her 2 minutes to do something else. That's clear. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't understand it. And when I told her, and the teacher said, you should know, when I told her to do it, she said, I can't do that. We don't believe in that. And I said, well, you should have listened. She's like, yeah, I should have. But she told me, she did stand up and tell me. So, you know, after that, that teacher didn't like look at me like, oh, you're a troublemaker. They came to me like, when February came around, do you have some materials we could use for quote unquote Black History Month? These people, like Shukura said, you stand on your principles. That's how you get people to respect you. The problem that too many of us have is we're trying to twist and bend and be representative of this system and try to do our best to not create any waves. And all you're doing is telling people that you're not even worth dealing with. Nobody respects nobody that does that. But when you stand for what you believe in, even if people don't agree, they have to respect you. Because most of us out here don't have the courage and commitment to stand for anything. So people want to be able to do that. So when they see you do it, they have to respect it, even if they don't understand it. They have to respect it. But you have to be consistent. And that happens from the constant communication, the reinforcement, and the understanding and acceptance that you're going to be alienated in this society. And you have to be prepared for that. You have to, that cannot be something that you can't handle. If that gives you anxiety, then you're not gonna be able to fulfill this objective, because there's gonna be plenty of that. They're gonna be coming after you. That's how the system works. So some healthy practices that learn how to have healthy conversation. Like I said, back and forth. You want to have healthy conversation, and that conversation needs to be about who we are in this society. Every day we would talk about what happened. And I used to tell Shukura, if you have a teacher that helps you, you remember that? Remember what I told you? What did I tell you? If a teacher helps you, then that's a bonus. Like, you don't expect any help from any of them, right? Like, you can't be, like, they're not here to help you. And I know a lot of you are like shocked. You don't want to accept that, but the evidence is overwhelming. If you look at our children, these institutions are not here. They're here to put our kids in prison. And anybody that doesn't want to accept that is living in a fantasy world. This is 2021. I mean, I'm not having that debate with people in 2021. This system is here to imprison and murder us, nothing else. The cotton is picked, you all. They got machines to do that now. They don't need us anymore. They haven't needed us in a long time. So we are in their way. That's how they see it. So if you're not preparing your children for that, you're a disservice as a parent, rather. Oh, just when the police pull you over, just make sure you're dressed nice and da-da-da. You are not dealing, it doesn't matter how your kids are dressed. They're not safe from these terrorists just because they have a suit on. You're giving them a false sense of security that's going to get them killed. You got to train your kids to understand that these police are here to keep us down. So train them in how to talk to these people, in ways to get out of that, how to avoid these people, how to create conditions so that we can organize against these people. That's how you got to raise your kids. And that's the way to keep your kids the safest. And I know most of us don't want to do that because we're afraid. Well, it's too late to be afraid. And some of us are not afraid. Some of us are sick of this and want to see it stop. So as Malcolm X said, if you're so afraid that you can't situate yourself to do what's right for justice and forward progress, then it's like Malcolm said again, he asked people, who here wants freedom? Everybody raised their hand. Then he asked people, who is ready to die for freedom? And most of the people raised their hand. And he said, who's willing to kill for freedom? And only about 5 or 6 people raised their hand. He said, well, you 5 or 6, first thing you need to do is kill all the people that didn't raise their hand. So if you're not willing to prepare your children for the reality that they're dealing with in this society, then you're setting them up to be targeted by this system. And it doesn't matter how well intentioned you are. The road to hell is paved with that. We got to wake up and soberly look at what we're dealing with in this society. So communication is the key with your child. And you, in order for you to educate them, of course, you got to be educated. You got to know our history. So that's part of parenting. That's not extracurricular for you to know our African history. That's a primary requirement for parenting children and having relationships. Being in relationship with someone is to understand these things. These are not extracurricular, just extra. That's the problem now. That's how we look at it. We think the primary thing is having a job and being able to buy stuff. That's not the primary. It don't mean nothing. The primary thing is our mental and spiritual health. Because you can have mental and spiritual health and you can get the money you need. Like I told people my whole life, I don't even worry about money because I live based on principles. And every job I've had, I've made good money because people respect me and they know what I can do. But if your life is based on money and not principles, you'll never have nothing. You know, even when you die, even if you die a billionaire, when you die, the only people around you are going to be people trying to get your money because you never had any principles. You never took care of anybody. You never cared about anybody. So you can't have it both ways. You got to have it one way. So when we talk about living by principles, that communication with your children, your significant other, whoever, is going to be based on education and communication. And then on top of that, you build institutions to help you, reinforce that. So you can't just ignore Christmas. These capitalists have a vast propaganda campaign. They will drive your own children against you if you just act like it's not happening. So nobody here is suggesting that, but you can be creative. We got brains, let's use them. So what we did with Shukura is when December came, maybe a week before December 25th, we would give her gifts. But the whole year we would tell her, you getting gifts is contingent upon your behavior, how well you perform in the house, how well you perform at school. And it was never a problem with her. But come December, because she knew what she was doing, she expected these gifts. And we would just give them to her, our family. And then eventually, as our family grew to respect what we were doing, they would just do that. We didn't have no Christmas tree and no Santa Claus, none of that nonsense in our house. So I don't know what to tell you if you don't see how much healthier it is. Look at what we're doing. We're lying to telling them some big old European white man is coming into their house, bringing them some print. Like, what are you? And then after that, you're gonna complain about white supremacy. You're the reason that white supremacy is being promoted in your family. You're the one promoting it. The tooth fairy. You got all these white people coming in your house, take care of your kids, and then you don't understand why your kids adopt white supremacist values. That's the problem. And I'm not trying to judge nobody, but I didn't want to do all that. So we told her the truth. Yeah, ain't nobody European coming up in here unless we invite them in here. You know our friends that are European, they coming in here, they don't have no power you don't have. In fact, you got more power than them. So that's all that's all that is. All that stuff is out the window. So create your own values and institutions. So that was our institution in December. We would have that. And then we had incoming for the new year. We had rites of passage. When Shukura was 16, her mother and I, we had been divorced, I don't know how many years, 10, 11 years. We organized together a rites of passage party. We had Dr. Catherine Hall there. She did the ceremony. She's the founder of the Birthing Project. Have you ever heard of that? Doulas are popular now, but didn't nobody know nothing about doulas when Dr. Catherine Hall started her work with the Birthing Project. You should look that up. She did Shukura's rites of passage ceremony here in Sacramento. Shukura had all her friends there. About how many? About 30 friends, something like that. Yeah, something like that. They were all in there. They sat there, all nationalities, Asian, European, indigenous, African. And we had the African rites of passage ceremony for her to become a young woman in African culture. And then after that, because you have to be creative. Then we had a DJ there, and then they danced. I remember they did the rites of passage. Then if I remember right, the big song was 50 Cent. What was it? 21 Questions. And that was the first song the DJ played, and you all do 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 do. Nothing wrong with that. It was very healthy, but the foundation was our culture. 50 Cent wasn't the foundation. That was the addendum. The foundation, y'all, the 50 Cent's the foundation. The foundation was African culture, revolutionary African personality culture. That was the foundation. And we all had, we had all the families there. See, y'all gotta understand what this looks like. This collective family. Who was there, Shukura? Stop from a line. Stop me if I'm lying. My parents had passed away by then, but we had parents, step-parents, all kind of family was there. All of them were there for the rites of passage. And that's how we did everything. When she graduated high school, everybody was there. You know, they had to be there. My mom was there. Her mother's parents were there. Everybody was there. When she graduated college, same thing. This is how we do stuff, y'all. And if people got problems with each other, we tell them, we talk about it. We tell them that this is a collective family. When my mother was living, I had to talk to her because my mother I love my mom. I missed her every day, but she was really something. So I had to, and then she didn't like anybody. You know, she didn't like anybody. So is that woman coming? Well, of course she's coming, Mom. She's part of the family. Well, if she looks at me strange, I'm like, if she looks at you strange, you're going to take a deep breath and you're not going to say anything because this is about Shukura. This is not about you or me. I had to talk to my mom. When we came to Shukura's graduation, I had to go to San Francisco to pick her up and drive all the way back. I had to talk to her about that. And so by the time we got here, she's like, okay, son, you're right. I'm going to act right. But my mother used the N-word, but I'm like, okay, well, you keep all that to yourself. We're not doing any of that today. Okay, you know how it is when we do our thing. Like, we're not doing all that negativity. We're not in Hunters Point in San Francisco. We're not doing that anymore. You know, we got away from all that. We're here trying to build something for our family and for our people. Okay, son, you're right. You into that Abdullah stuff. That's what she always called it. But she respected it. She grew to respect it, so I didn't care. She called whatever she wanted. And then look for others that are attempting to establish healthy revolutionary families and build with them. Surround yourself with people who are trying to have the same revolutionary, if you're African, revolutionary African values. If you're not African, revolutionary values. Surround yourself. Like, you can't stay, like, we knew this. We had to cut people off. Not cut them off like we're not going to ever talk to them again, but we had to explain to them what we're doing, and they didn't want to do it. Like, I love my sister to death. She's the only living person left in my immediate family, but she was never gonna like participate in this, but she had to learn to respect it, because I had to tell her, you have to respect this, because she want to call me by my slave name. She want to use the N-word. I'm like, well, around here, we don't do that. Well, can I get some liquor? Okay, you can get it, but we're gonna have a conversation. I wish she'd come to visit. I'll take you to get your liquor. But we have a conversation. In front of Shukura, we'd say, so Shukura, you know, adults can enjoy adult beverages. That's fine. I don't do it. I've never done it. Your mom doesn't do it. She's never done it. But there's no problem in people doing it if they maintain control. So your aunt is going to do this. So we would talk about every single thing. Y'all make a serious error when stuff happens and you don't address it, because you're allowing capitalism to frame your child's perspective when you don't address it. So we didn't want to do that. We addressed you might say that's crazy to be talking about, but that's what you got to do. So we would talk about that. So we had the All African People's Revolutionary Party. You know, we had other comrades who raised kids, and we had a unit. We had a extended family with the same values. So we all did the same. So I didn't have to worry about when Nehanda was watching Shukura or Camille or Akabundu or whoever, the Lumumbas. I didn't have to worry about them getting high or any of that around my kids, and they didn't have to worry about that when their kids are with us, because we knew that we had the same values, so we would do that. I mean, I'm not putting you down if you get high, that's your thing, but that was just not something we wanted to do in our family. So we wanted to have an environment where that was respected. And so you have to do work to do that. And if you don't want to do the work, you're not going to have that. That's all. I mean, it requires a lot to have a family struggling to have revolutionary principles. And the last thing I say about this, because a lot of us are confused. Like, I hear this all the time. Well, how are you going to have revolutionary values? You live in a capitalist society. I mean, and people really think they're mic dropping when they say stuff like that. They really think they're saying something when they say stuff like that. Like, that's child logic to say something like that. And the way I respond to people illustrates that to them. So I tell them, so what you're saying to me is, if somebody's in prison, then they should celebrate the prison, right? Like, they should be so happy. They should never want to, like, well, you're in prison. Yeah, but this is the most wonderful place on earth. It's like Disneyland. I love it. Why do you say that? Because I'm here and I have to adopt this attitude because I'm here. Like, that's insane. You're at a bad job where you're being mistreated every day. Yeah, but it's the most wonderful place. I know. What kind of logic is that? The way that you prepare yourself to get a better job is you recognize this job is trash. The way you prepare yourself to have a better society is you recognize this society is trash. As long as you're trying to make this society comfortable for you, you're never going to do anything to create anything better. Never going to do that. So every day we're telling ourselves this is the most backward place on earth, not because it's a lie. You can't refute it. There's no question it's the most backward place on earth. And we want to create something better for African people. And the only way we see us doing that is through Africa's liberation. And so you have to know that. So yeah, you can be in a capitalist society and you most certainly can create institutions that represent the values that we want to subscribe to achieve. And by doing that, we'll be closer, as the generations go, we'll get closer and closer to freedom. Shukura is farther along than I was when I was her age in a lot of ways. And the kids that you raise and go through this process are going to be the same way too. So that's why it's important because we're trying to change the culture. And the way we change the culture, I mean, y'all say it like each one teach one. So, okay, then that's what we're doing. And by doing that, we're building a collective consciousness. Each one teach one doesn't mean just teach one person and that's it. That's why it says each one teach one. And we build capacity that way. That's what that's about. So if you understand that, I'm sorry, it's stupid to turn around and say, well, what's the point of doing that? You live in a capitalist society. I mean, some of this stuff is like, you wish you could just go away and just, but that's not going to solve the problem. So again, important to say the foundation of all of this, you all, is that you have to be like, if you don't know anything, if you don't have any information, you can't supply any information. So an organized political education process, you got to be participating in that. And then even if your partner is not, you can build a foundation based on that with your partner, your children, your parents, anyone you want to. But if you don't have that, you don't have a basis to do that. So I was fortunate in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we have that, and that translated into our life. And even though Shukura's mom has not been active in the party for years, we've never stopped exhibiting the values. She's still very strong, supportive. We never stop. So that's why that happens. So that's a beautiful thing. So we want to invite you to participate in all of these resources that we have available to you. We're talking about information. I know, you may feel like, well, it's hard for me to read books, but you can get started by using some of these great resources. We have, if you want to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we have here the site to the middle left of your screen, APRP-intl.org. We encourage you to reach out. A lot of you are doing that. There's an orientation video if you do that, and then you'll be connected to whoever's closest to you, and we'll get you started in an AAPRP work study circle, mass organized political education. If you don't want to do that, then join some of the other organizations operational around here, and we'll name some of them. And you can go to www.abetterworld.me, Ahjamu Umi's Truth Challenge. All of these videos are housed there. So if you want to go back and look at one, or if you want to reference someone else who was not able to catch it and doesn't do YouTube or whatever, you can go there and look at all these videos. And there's articles there that I've written as well. So check that out. And then I'm in the editorial collective for hoodcommunist.org, www.hoodcommunist.org. Read that. Revolutionary analysis from people in the APRP, Black Alliance for Peace, Ujima People's Progress Party, Black Hammer, Cooperation Jackson, all kind of people write articles in the African left, the radical African left for Hood Communists. So you want to check that out. It's a beautiful site, and I'm honored to participate there. And then we have a number of these broadcasts. If you want more, or maybe you just don't like me or whatever the case may be, you want to get somebody else, we have a whole litany of them, and we encourage you to check them out. The APRP Pantula podcast by our comrades on the East Coast of the United States, the Forward Ever podcast. I'm not even sure where those Africans are, but they're doing that from the APRP. Check that out. Our comrades and I missed one on here, but it's the Raw podcast from our comrades in Southern California, Revolutionary African Women. Our APRP comrades in the Los Angeles area do that one. So Raw, look that up. And then our weekly APRP New Mexico chapter broadcast, 11 a.m. Mountain Time every Thursday. You want to listen to that one. And we want to invite you back next week. Or actually, we have a very special edition as a part of our African Liberation Day programming for 2021. And African Liberation Day is an institution. We've talked about that. Capitalism has its institutions. They're getting ready to get you all into Memorial Day so you can celebrate imperialism, raiding and ravaging countries all over the world. And then after that, they got their ace one, the 4th of July, where they try to convince you that this is freedom and democracy. So they institutionalize their values through their institutions. Well, we have African Liberation Day as our institution of liberation and Pan-Africanism being the solution. So we have a series of events. And so one of the initial ones we're kicking off is Wednesday. I want to invite you to join us, 4:45 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to talk about Malcolm X and African Liberation Day. That'll be May 19th, which is Malcolm X's born day. So we're going to talk about his Pan-African contributions. So join us Wednesday from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, same channels. And Shukura and I are going to talk about Malcolm and African Liberation Day. And then we're going to rebroadcast that segment next Sunday, the 23rd. So join us Wednesday, May 19th, 4 to 5 p.m. Get a guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence. The book I wrote, I said I wanted to put a book out there and have it widely read, and I got what I wished for. That is happening with this book, and I am busy with this book, and I cannot complain because it's work from people who want to get organized, and that is the reason that we exist. So please continue to get the book. And African Liberation Day, is May 23rd and May 25th. We have, or May 23rd, May 25th, we have 2 days of events. And the flyer to the right, the theme is Forward Ever to Worldwide Pan-African Unity. And if you're going to be traveling, we're going to have events on the ground in Africa, in other parts of the world. We're just doing this webcast here in the US. There is an event in Baltimore that the party's doing. But other than that, we're not having it on the ground events. Hopefully next year we can get back to that here. But we are doing it in Tanzania, or what you call South Africa, Zimbabwe, Kenya, we have events. Ghana, we have events. Guinea-Bissau, we have events. Senegal, we have events in Africa on the ground that we're doing. And we have events in Germany. And I'm actually talking to some of those Africans on Tuesday in Germany about the work they're doing and further connecting with them. So we appreciate each and every one of you. Again, go to www.abetterroad.me for the video. If you missed it or you want to see it again, you should probably look at this one again, Building Values in Revolutionary Families. Join us for a special edition on Wednesday night. It's going to be very good. African Liberation Day 2021, Forward Ever, Backwards Never, One Unified Socialist Africa, you all. Smash, destroy patriarchy and all oppression against women and women identifying people. Smash homophobia. White supremacy is a decadent, backward system, and capitalism, y'all already know, it's got to go. Forward ever, backwards never. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday evening.